Welcome, everybody, to the Fanmouth Daily Fantasy Baseball Breakdown for Tuesday, May the 20th. I'm Joe Marsh, joined by Mr. Fantasy himself, Dave Del Grande. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing great. What a schedule tonight.
Yeah, we weren't on yesterday. There was a very small slate, which means pretty much everybody's playing tonight. 15 games on the evening slate. We'll go through position by position, tell you who we like, give you our recommendations to help you build your lineup for tonight. I think tonight's actually starting with pitching. It's a good night for pitching. There's a lot of good options. Starts with Tanaka. He's been spectacular so far. Only one game where he actually failed, where he struck out less than 7 batters, 10.24 Ks per nine. Had good success already against the Cubs. Struck out 10 last time they played, and the Cubs are hitting just 225 against righties. So that's a great option there. Then you've got Johnny Cueto leading the league in ERA and WHIP. He's made a quality start every time he's been out. Hasn't pitched less than 7 innings in any start. Hasn't allowed more than 5 hits in any start. And he's facing the Nationals, who are pretty much average across the board offensively, but they're in Washington, which is a pitcher's park. The problem with the two of them is I don't think you can start them both at the same time. I think it's going to cost you too much. Cost you about 38% of your cap space today on Fanmouth. So I think you're going to need to pick between the two of them and look for another option. I suggest flipping a coin to decide between the two of them. But actually, no, I'd probably give the edge to Tanaka, very slight edge. But I honestly don't think you can go wrong either way. I would probably pair them with Ventura, who's been outstanding. He's facing the White Sox, who are a good offense, but they don't have Abreu right now. So I think that's gonna affect their offense a lot. And they do strike out a lot. The White Sox are leading the league in strikeouts. If you want, I don't on the Fanmouth game. There's not a lot of reason to go very cheap, but I would throw out just Pomeranz. He struck out 30 batters in 23 innings. He's made 2 starts so far. They've been very good starts. So if you want a very cheap option, I think that's a good play. Sorry to take so much time, Dave. What do you think?
Well, it's a good position to take a lot of time with because there's a lot of good options, like you said. And I agree with your top two choices, and I agree that it's a tough decision to make. What I would suggest is instead of picking your pitchers first today, is to go ahead and pick your lineup first and just see, do you want your lineup to be real strong, in which case you're going to have to look for some bargains in the pitching ranks, and I think there are some, or do you see a lot of bargains among the hitters, in which case maybe you can get both Tanaka and Cueto, because it's on any night having one of them would be great to anchor your staff when they're both pitching. Man, it's going to be hard to go against either one of them. But like I said, maybe you look at the lineup and say, well, I got to have these 3 hitters in there, and if I do, then I got to go with cheaper pitchers. Let me focus on the cheaper pitchers. I think there are a lot of them. I think that average price or below. I think that Feldman of Houston has pitched great this year. The Angels are not a great hitting team against right-handed pitchers. They're pitching their weakest pitcher tonight. It's a game I think Houston's got a chance to win. They've actually been playing decent ball. And Liriano of Pittsburgh hasn't had a great season necessarily, but he's at home. Baltimore is not a good hitting team against lefties. Baltimore does not have a good pitcher going tonight. So in both of these cases, I look for good pitchers against weaker hitting teams, on games that I think that they're going to win, and the price is right on both of them. So I even look at the middle ground pitchers, and I think, wow, Wainwright and Kennedy are 2 high strikeout pitchers. They're both pitching at home. They're both pitching against teams they should beat. Wainwright's pitching against Arizona. Kennedy's pitching against Minnesota. And these are 2 below average offensive teams. Their prices are fairly high, but not as high as the big heavyweight guys. So, like I said, there's 3 different ways you can attack pitching today: the real heavyweights, the middleweights, or the lightweights. And I would recommend, using your hitters to dictate that.
Oh, great stuff there from Dave. Always with a fresh perspective for us. What about my guy, Pomeranz? Am I saying that right?
You are. My concern about him is, both his starts have been at home, and he goes on the road here for the first time. He's pitched great. You're right. He is a strikeout pitcher, no doubt about it. A hard-throwing, left-handed guy. But I respect Tampa against they're playing Tampa today. I respect Tampa against left-handed hitters. Tampa is at home. I'm just given the other options at pitcher today. I don't really want to take that kind of a chance.
Okay, good stuff there from Dave. Yeah, like I said, that's a very low-priced option. I think it's decent, but like I said, I don't think you need to save that much in the Fanmouth game tonight. All right, moving to catcher. I'm pretty sure we both got the same guy. Who do you like?
Well, we have the same guy as our heavyweight catcher, but I'm not sure that I really want to go there. I will if I can afford him. We're talking about Buster Posey tonight. The Giants are a hot hitting team. They've hit as many homers as any other team in baseball. They are particularly effective hitting homers against left-handed pitchers, and lo and behold, they're facing Morales tonight, who has given up a lot of homers this year. In fact, I think he's tied for the league lead in homers allowed. So it's a good matchup for your powerful right-handed Giants bats, and I would recommend getting a couple of them in there. Normally that would mean, well, you definitely want Posey in there, and if you can afford him, I would go with it. My second option would be the A's have been the hottest hitting team in baseball. You're definitely going to want a couple A's going today against Odorizzi, who's a very mediocre right-handed pitcher. When right-handers pitch, that puts Jaso in the lineup for the A's. He's a very offensive-minded catcher, DH sometimes. You can get him at a very cheap price in a very good matchup. So, again, it comes down to you got money to spend. You can't go wrong with Posey. You want to save a little money there. I think Jaso's a good option.
So we do have the same players at both, actually. Yeah, Posey's hitting 324 on the road this season. Obviously hitting in Coors Field against Morales. Morales has a 5.89 ERA in Coors Field, allowing a 3.14 batting average to right-handers. Another thing to remember in this game, the over-under is 10, so I think there's good plays on both sides of the ball. We're going to talk about, a few more of them. Even with Bumgarner pitching, feel free to get some Rockies in the lineup. Yeah, and then Jaso's been hot, hitting 333 in the month of May. Facing Odorizzi, gives up a 293 batting average to lefties. Jaso's still a bit underpriced because of, he's not hitting it, not playing every day. But if he's in the lineup, he's always a good spot to save money.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the over/under on the Giants game against the Rockies is 10. That is not because Bumgarner's pitching. I mean, Bumgarner's the Giants' ace pitcher. Now, he hasn't had a great season, but if you wanted to, look at that 10 and break it down, you'd probably say, well, they're expecting 4 runs against him and 6 runs against Morales because, like you said, Morales has a huge ERA at home this year. And so, it'd be nice to consider some Rockies. I would certainly give a higher preference to the Giants there.
Right. I did look. Bumgarner has struggled in Colorado as well. He's got an ERA over 4. And like I said, Morales is just under 6 ERA, so there's your 10 runs right there. But, so, I mean, obviously the Giants are better plays, but I wouldn't fear the Rockies too much just because Bumgarner's pitching because he hasn't had much success at Coors Field. Moving over to first base, my home run guy, I think, Adrian Gonzalez. He's got 9 home runs in 114 at-bats this season against right-handers, hitting 307 against them. And then he's facing Rafael Montero, who's only made 1 start, so there's not much of a sample size, but he threw 6 innings and gave up 2 home runs to left-handers, so that's a pretty big number right there. So that makes me think Gonzalez is a good candidate for a home run. And then I'll throw out an honorable mention because there's nowhere else to put him is Brandon Moss. I think that's a guy you got to consider. If you have a different first baseman, you have to consider him in your utility spot. A guy I've been sticking with all season, saying the power's going to come. Finally, the power's coming. He's killing it in May, hitting 356 with 5 homers. I think he's got 3 home runs this week. So that's another guy who I love today. So hopefully I can have money to get him into my utility spot. What are you thinking at first base?
I agree with both of those choices. I think they're great choices, and I also like the idea of maybe using one of them at utility. You mentioned Montero. He's only pitched 1 time, but in that game, no right-handers got a hit off of him. Meanwhile, left-handers batted 333. It's small sample size, but it's enough for me to conclude, you know what, I don't want any part of the Dodger right-handed hitters in this lineup, in this game, but I'll certainly consider Gonzalez and Ethier and Crawford against this guy. So I think Gonzalez is a good play, but I'd actually rate Moss ahead of him. Moss is I mentioned the A's are the hottest hitting team in the league. Moss might be the hottest hitting player in all of baseball right now. Just had a monster week last week, and against a very mediocre pitcher going tonight, I don't see any reason for him to cool off tonight. So I like both your choices.
Yeah, that's my boy, Brandon Moss. All right, moving over to second base. A guy I give you a lot is D. Gordon. We just talked about Montero. Gordon's hitting 341 against righties. Like I said, Montero struggled against lefties. And then I like his chance to run against Darno. He's thrown out just 3 of 15 base stealers. That's not a very good percentage. That's 20%. And Gordon's a guy, he's got 25 steals already, I believe. So I think he's got a good chance to hit and a good chance to run today. So big points there. If you want to go for a cheap option, another guy who's still underpriced is Ricky Weeks. Hitting 560 in the month of May, hitting 417 against righties this season. So I think Ricky Weeks is a good play as well. What do you think at second base?
I think there are a lot of options here. I like the Gordon play. I also think there's 2 matchups involving second basemen that are solid matchups tonight. Whether you want to pick their second baseman or look elsewhere, that's your decision. But Boston tonight against Happ. Happ has a high average against right-handed hitters. Obviously, Pedroia is the best right-handed hitter that Boston offers. He's a high-price guy, but it's a good matchup for him. I would certainly recommend getting 1 or 2 of Boston's right-handers in the lineup tonight. I'd say the same thing about Miami's left-handers. Miami is a surprisingly good hitting team. They go back home tonight. They've got some nice pop from the left side of the plate. They're facing Burnett tonight. Burnett's got a 310 average against left-handers. So I would look to get a couple of Miami's left-handers in the lineup if you could. Dietrich is a left-handed hitting second baseman, a low-price guy, but with a lot of power for a second baseman. And if this is a position where you decide you want to save some money, I think he would be a very good option for you. So I think there are 3 guys, including your guy Gordon there, who are all very solid plays, again, depending upon how much money you want to spend.
All right. Yeah. I don't have a lot of good stuff at third base, so I'll go ahead and let you lead off and defer to you a bit. What are you thinking at third base?
Well, I'm thinking of saving money at third base. I think, Josh Donaldson of the A's has been hitting well, but I don't, I mentioned Odorizzi. You've mentioned as well, he has a high average against left-handers, not so much against right-handers. So I don't think it's the ideal matchup for, the A's right-handed hitters in this game. So I'm going to pass on what appears to be maybe an obvious choice and look for a better matchup. And, there's 2 good matchups here, I think, in terms of the, teams against the pitchers they're facing. We already mentioned one, and that's the Giants against Colorado. Pablo Sandoval's got a 9-game hitting streak. He's on a really nice run offensively. He even hit his first homer in a month in Sunday's game. He's facing tonight this left-handed pitcher who's got a 314 average against. I think he's got a real nice shot tonight in that game to get a couple of hits. Seattle tonight. Seattle's not a great hitting team, but they do hit better against right-handers. And Lewis is pitching tonight for Texas. Lewis has been far less than mediocre. He's got a 312 average against left-handed hitters. Seattle's got a bunch of left-handed hitters. I think you can consider, playing a Seattle guy or 2. You might argue that Seager, their third baseman, is their best hitter. And he's certainly numbers-wise, he appears to be. He's had a better season than Cano. He's another third baseman like Sandoval. You save a couple of $1,000s on Fanmouth by going with guys like that rather than Donaldson. So that's where I'm looking at Sandoval and Seager rather than a high-price guy.
Yeah, for my high price guy, I went with Adrian Beltre just because of his history against Iwakuma, hitting 364, 2 home runs in 22 at-bats. Iwakuma has been good in his 2 home starts, but was a bit rocky on the road. But I'm going to go with you. I didn't have much behind that, so I'm gonna go ahead and second your nod for Seager. I think Seager's a very solid play tonight, so that's where I'm going to go. And then moving over to shortstop, you and I have talked before about Brandon Crawford, how for some reason he's hitting well against lefties, hitting 370 with 3 home runs against lefties this season. He's got a weak one in Morales playing in Coors Field. I think that's a good money-saving option as well. What are you thinking?
Well, let's start with why you shouldn't play Tulowitzki. And he's been, this guy who you've absolutely had to have in your lineup, a no-brainer basically every day of the season. But I respect Bumgarner. I don't think this is a great matchup for Tulowitzki, and his price, he has a lot of great matchups. I don't think today is one of them where I'd be willing to spend that kind of price. The way I look at it, there's two really high-priced hitters that if I doubt you're going to play both of them. If you had to make a choice between Tulowitzki and Bautista in the outfield, I think Bautista's got a lot better matchup tonight, so I would go with him ahead of Tulowitzki in terms of the real high-priced anchor to your lineup. What's that leave at shortstop? I mentioned the Red Sox right-handed hitters against Happ tonight. Bogaerts it has been a real good hitter against left-handed pitching. His price is very average price. You save a bunch of money rather than playing Tulowitzki. You get a real good matchup. I agree with your assessment of Crawford as well. I'd rather have a big right-handed hitting guy against this particular pitcher going tonight. Look for a home run from a Posey or Pence or Morse. But I think Bogaerts, is a guy who I might even pair with Pedroia and give two Red Sox in the middle infield tonight.
Yeah, getting back to what you said, that was good stuff about Tulowitzki, because we talked about it last week when he was about 10,000. And I said, at 10,000, you got to start him unless he's a couple thousand more. Well, now he's almost a couple thousand more. I think he's approaching 12,000 on Fanmouth. That's when you really got to consider, I need to prioritize getting my pitchers in order more than that, so I can afford to have a Tanaka or a Cueto and one of the next tier guys that you mentioned, a Wainwright or a Ventura, and find another option offensively because pitching is too important. And like you said, and then there's a lot to like in the outfield as well. So I don't like spending 12,000 nearly. I believe he's 11.9, but I don't like spending that at shortstop at all.
Well, and as I mentioned him right from the get-go here. Go ahead and if you like Tulowitzki, and what's not to like about him, and you put him in your lineup, and maybe you put Bautista in there as well, maybe you like Posey, and Gonzalez, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of high-priced guys, then see what that leaves you for pitchers. And if you're comfortable with some bottom-end pitchers going tonight, then fine. Go with your all-star lineup of hitters, knowing that your opponent's going to have Cueto and Tanaka going. And you're going to be way behind in pitching points. But that's the way some people play the game. It's not a bad idea on some nights. It's just that, you have to be comfortable with that. And if you look at what's left in pitching and you say, oh, man, I can't stoop to this level. I got to take one of my heavyweight hitters out of there in order to get a better pitcher. Well, then I would recommend that Tulowitzki would be the guy you sit in order to get a better pitcher. But you have to feel that out for yourself.
Yeah, and then moving over to the outfield, there's a couple good options. You already mentioned Bautista, absolutely killing left-handed pitching this season, hitting .432, 5 home runs in 37 at-bats. That's a little over 1 home run every 8 at-bats. That's a monster number. Carlos Gonzalez as well, hitting .370 at home. And he's got a great history against Bumgarner, hitting .351. He's also got 5 home runs in 37 at-bats. So a lot of home run potential there. I went with Gonzalez. I may regret that later, but there's a few places you can look for a good shot at a home run. You talked about Pence. He's hitting .375 against lefties this season. A lot to like in that game. And then Matt Holliday, too. You want another cheap option. He's got 4 home runs and 54 at-bats against Arroyo. We haven't talked about Arroyo much because he's been good in his last few starts, but I don't mind a few of the Cardinals as well tonight. What do you think in the outfield?
Well, the outfield to me today is like the pitching is as well. I think there are 3 high-priced outfielders that I feel very strongly about that I would like to put in the lineup until I look at the cheaper options and see some guys down there where I think, man, I'd like to get them in there and save some money. I think you mentioned Bautista, you mentioned Pence. Both are hot, especially Pence is a very hot-hitting outfielder with a good matchup against a lefty who gives up homers. You didn't mention McCutchen of the Pirates. Gonzalez is pitching tonight for Baltimore. He's got a .342 average against right-handed hitters. I think McCutchen's a very strong play tonight as well. And so those are 3 high-priced outfielders. I'm not sure you can afford 3 high-priced guys. But if you can't, I think there's 4 really good cheaper guys. Morse to me is almost the equivalent of Pence, except that he's a lot cheaper. He's my home run pick for the night. I think it's a good matchup of a guy who's hit a lot of homers against a pitcher who's given up a lot of homers. I mentioned Crawford before of the Dodgers, a left-handed hitter against a right-handed pitcher who's seems to not be able to get left-handers out in Montero. The A's, Josh Reddick, for all people have laughed at him, he's kind of the equivalent of Pablo Sandoval. He didn't get a hit till basically May 1st, but now that you can't get him out, now he's hitting home runs. And he's a hot hitter. He's a very cheap price guy. I think he's a good option in the outfield. And then the new leadoff hitter in Seattle, Jones, has really hit well. He's got a high average. He's got some speed. Seattle, I mentioned this earlier, I think Seattle's got the number one hitting, as a team. I think they're the number one option tonight going against Lewis, is a far less than a mediocre pitcher. So I think he's a good option as well. So I think there's 4 cheap guys who are good options. I think there are 3 high-priced guys who are good options. And, it's time to mix and match.
Yeah, great stuff there from Dave. A lot to like in the outfield today. That covers all the positions, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I'll go ahead and give you my final word. Like I said, I love Tanaka and Cueto, but I don't think I can start both of them together. I'll probably do 2 different lineups tonight, to be honest with you. I'll probably do one with either Tanaka and Cueto with Ventura, and mix a few high price and low price guys in my lineup to round it out. And then I may do one with whoever I don't pick from Tanaka and Cueto with Pomeranz, and see if I can get some of these high price bats in my offense as well. Maybe try to get Bautista, Adrian Gonzalez, and Carlos Gonzalez in there and build a bit of a bigger offense. I like taking my chance with Pomeranz today. I think he may be able to post a high strikeout total regardless of anything else. But I think tonight's a night for multiple lineups. It's just too many outfielders and some good options on the field. So I would say, play a few games, set a few different lineups, see what works for you. Dave, what do you think?
Well, and I agree with that, especially if you're just learning how to play the day-to-day fantasy game. You have to decide for yourself. This is all about enjoying, playing the game. If you're like a basketball fan who enjoys a high-scoring games where your team loses by a couple points, but you're more entertained, then go throw some, all the big hitters in there and go for cheap pitchers. Or if you're the other way around and you're more conservative, you'd rather ride these high-priced pitchers and take some real reaches in your hitters, then play the game that way. And then as you play, just see which way works best for you. I think you could argue that even before you submit your lineup, I think there's 3 different ways you can go. You can go with the 2 high-priced pitchers and see what that leaves you hitting-wise. Tanaka and Cueto being the high-priced guys. There's 2 mid-level pitchers, I think, in Wainwright and Kennedy, who are 2 high strikeout pitchers who are, I think are going to have good games tonight, and see where that leaves you with kind of a mediocre hitting attack. Or you can stoop to the level of Feldman and Liriano, 2 lower-priced pitchers, and then get a couple more high-priced hitters in there. So, take a look at all 3 of those types of lineups, see which one you're more comfortable with, or like you said, heck, play them in 2 or 3 different leagues and see how it works out for you, and then maybe come tomorrow decide, this game you got to have more hitting, or wow, on Fanmouth you have to have more pitching. Draw your own conclusion, but you can only do that through experience. So I think you need to make that decision.
All right, great stuff there from Dave. I get the feeling tonight's going to be a fun night, so let's sign up. Let's play a few games over fanmouth.com. You can follow us on Twitter at PlayFanmouth, and if you want to check out our full rankings, blog.fanmouth.com, you can see who Dave and my top players are for tonight. That wraps it up. Dave and I will be back tomorrow. We'll be here every day this week. Thank you very much for joining us.